The story of Koby over the last 2 years is kind of wild. Imagine for a second you have this minion-looking kid, like Minions from Despicable Me, but with pink hair, suddenly becoming one of the absolute top tiers of the entire series. Who would have thought? Not me. It can be argued that power scaling in One Piece is a little bit wacky, or maybe a lot a bit wacky, kind of like the show itself. I can definitely see how it might bother people that a character like this would grow as we have seen. But I do think that was precisely what Oda wanted to do with the story. Power and desire go hand in hand. Want to or will matters. When the show first began, a lot of people wanted Luffy to be a nobody from nowhere who ultimately changes the world from very humble roots, which hasn't panned out as the story has been expanded. But if you like a character like this, then Koby is the guy for you, because that's truly what he is. One of the core themes of the story of One Piece is that anything is possible. It may not be possible for you, it may not be possible in your lifetime. Frankly, you might just die. But if it can be dreamed, it can happen. And Koby is definitely living his dream. But if we're honest, none of this happens unless Koby meets Luffy. Luffy saved Koby and empowered him. Luffy's belief in himself was infectious, but more specifically, Luffy taught Koby a valuable lesson. Fear is a self-imposed shackle. You'll never get anywhere if you're too afraid to start. But from the very start, you knew that this relationship would forever end up being weird, because Luffy is a pirate, and Koby desires to become a Marine. Regardless of whether Koby respects him, looks up to him, idolizes him, by joining the Marines in the future, they both cannot get what they want. One will end up destroying the other's worldview. I don't think that One Piece fans have ever taken Koby versus Luffy seriously. Maybe you still don't, but I think that you should. In my opinion, this is one of the most underrated dynamics that Oda has been building from literally the second chapter of One Piece. So let's discuss. If you're liking the One Piece content, make sure to hit the bell to be notified, subscribe, all that stuff. Let's begin. Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, Koby is going to have a huge role going forward. My Hero Academia has just ended, but if you liked the concept of that story, I think that there's a lot to like about Koby. Because Koby and Deku are very similar. Both are initially timid crybabies, born basically quirkless. Both have a strong sense of justice and want to save people. They are driven to be heroes. And both were selected by the former #1 hero to take their place. In chapter 1088, you have the One Piece version of All Might pointing to Deku and telling him, "You're next." While Garp wasn't just talking about Koby, Koby was very clearly the main character when he said, "All of you are the future of the Navy." And I would also say that this chapter is the definitive chapter, 1088, when Koby arrived. And he literally punched through the island of Hachinosu, controlled by Avalo Pizarro's Devil Fruit ability. I'm not 100% certain what I thought before this moment, but once this moment happened, it's kind of like all the pieces started to click together. We saw Koby when he was introduced in the story. Through a cover story, we saw Koby getting trained by Garp. It's like, okay, well, Koby is going to become like a legitimate member of the Marines, but he was still far away from becoming an admiral, which was his dream, his stated dream. Then in Marineford, just before the time skip, you could see Koby actually did something, but it wasn't because he was powerful. It was because he had a big heart and a great sense of right and wrong. The time skip then occurs, and we find out later that in this missing time period, Koby is now a name. He's considered to be a hero, but all of it is off screen. So then naturally doubt remains about just how legitimate this event was, the Rocky Port incident. But now I think that there's no escaping it. Koby's stated dream once again is to become an admiral, and I think that there's no doubt that Koby will be to the level of an admiral by the end of the story, if not legitimately named an admiral. Oda has put an enormous amount of effort behind Koby's storyline to make sure that he is prepared to be an actual combatant at the end. We're seeing these gains in real time. The nail in the coffin is the conclusion of chapter 1121. Oda shows us a panel of all of the players that are attempting to claim the One Piece. This is essentially the panel which demonstrates everybody who matters at the end of the story. These are the leaders of the various factions. The way that you should think about it is that every one of these characters are the actual players for the One Piece. So each of them represents some use for the One Piece, if they were to win. You have the Yonko, Luffy, Shanks, Blackbeard, and Buggy. You have Aokiji, who everybody knows at some point in time is going to betray Blackbeard. He is his own faction, and likely has unique plans for the One Piece if he were to obtain it. You have the world government represented by Imu. You have the celestial dragons represented by the leader of the God's Knights, Garling. This panel also implies that at some point in time, Garling will not necessarily be subservient to Imu. The revolutionary, strangely represented by two different characters, Dragon and Sabo. We'll skip over that. All I'm gonna say is that at some point in time, Sabo might become the leader of the revolutionary army, and Oda has definitely been setting that up. You then have one mysterious character who we don't know who it is, so there's not really much to say at this moment. And then you have two representatives from the Marines, Akainu and Koby. Firstly, implying that just the same as Garling and the God's Knights, that the Marines might not necessarily stay loyal and subservient to Imu, which is pretty duh the moment that Imu's existence is revealed. If Akainu obtains the One Piece, he is not going to give it to Imu. He is going to use it for himself and the Marines. But furthermore, the implication is that the Marines are not going to stay intact. There will be two leaders, essentially two fleet admirals, Koby and Akainu, with different plans for how to use the One Piece if they were to acquire it. Again, I think that this is kind of self-evident. Akainu will absolutely use the weapons, the ancient weapons, if he were to obtain them. Obviously, Koby would. This will be what divides the Marines. But as far as this video and our conversation, all you really need to take away from this is that by the end, Koby will become a direct rival of the four Yonko, the current fleet admiral, Imu, the God's Knights, and the Revolutionary Army. To reasonably do this, Koby must be in-game level strong. But let's make sure that we fully explain the splintering of the Marines, because I do think that this is important. It's stated in the story that Garp had multiple opportunities to become an admiral and chose not to. The given reason for this is freedom. As he says himself, I don't need any higher position than this to do things the way I like. Guys, I don't think that Garp never aspired to become an admiral when he was a kid. It's just through experience he realized that to be free, he had to remain a vice admiral, as well as join Sword. And likely a lot of this had to do with the admirals being required to come to the defense of the celestial dragons, such as we saw play out in Sabaody, where Luffy punched a celestial dragon and they immediately called an Admiral Kizaru, which Garp would not unconditionally do. Sengoku directly explains this. Garp's moral code doesn't permit him to fulfill that duty. In fact, the reason Garp has continually refused the rank of admiral is because becoming one will place him squarely under the thumb of the celestial dragons. But ultimately, Sengoku allowed him to be this way while still a member of the actual Marines. Whether Sengoku intended this or not, the reality is under his leadership, he encouraged individual interpretations of justice, which gave some amount of freedom to everybody that served in his Marines. The organization known as Sword really could only exist because Sengoku allowed it. Sengoku essentially had the power to determine whether or not these people were considered Marines or criminals. But you can do a hypothetical if you want. The moment that Sengoku orders Garp and requires Garp to fulfill some sort of duty that he can't, is the moment that Garp no longer is a member of the Marines. I think that Koby is soon to encounter a very similar situation. What is being threatened right now is the ability of individual Marines to have their own strong moral code, different to the moral code of those that have authority over them, or their superiors. This doesn't even have to relate to the Celestial Dragons. Akainu is a very different fleet admiral than Sengoku. There is no doubt that Akainu will issue orders or commands to Koby that Koby will not agree with, that Koby cannot follow while remaining free. So I definitely think that it's a cool thought that Koby essentially does what Garp did not, become an admiral, just not an admiral of the Marines as we know them. This isn't confirmed, but a lot of people believe that Garp was the one that created Sword, and he created Sword because of his own needs. Sword allowed Garp to act, and if ever he crossed some sort of line, the Marines could disown him, because whether or not he always agreed with them, Garp definitely wanted to protect the Marines as an organization, even potentially from himself. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Garp needed Sword. Without Sword, he would have been totally unable to be a Marine. And a sort of compromise was made where, yes, Garp, you can do as you want. You can be a member of Sword, but we, the government and the Marines, reserve the right to cut you off. But with how the story is tracking right now in Akainu as the Fleet Admiral, it is incredibly likely that Sword itself will be abolished. Even if it is not official, many of the members, or most of the members, are going to start to act against Akainu's Marines, until suddenly the delicate balance which is Sword no longer truly exists. All of these people will become criminals, who see themselves as heroes and as justice, as how the Marines should be, or how they were, and somebody from within will become their Fleet Admiral. This is obviously going to be Koby. But then once you're certain that this is what the future holds for him, you have to sort of reevaluate everything that we assumed prior. I don't think that there was ever a point that anybody ever thought that Koby might stand in Luffy's way. They're friends after all. Koby really isn't all that much different from a guy like Bartolomeo starting the Luffy fan club. I think during Marineford it creates this impression that Koby is going to see that Luffy is on the right side of history, and regardless of his affiliation with the Marines, he's going to be some kind of voice of reason, putting his faith in Luffy. But as of chapter 1122, this does not appear to be the case. This was, in fact, a plot twist. One I'm not sure that everybody really respected like other plot twists in the story, but is nonetheless significant. At the conclusion of Vegapunk's message, Koby says this: "Luffy, I have to stop your dream from being realized." So let's try to understand it. For me, there's no universe in which Koby actually believes that Luffy is evil, and if he were to acquire the One Piece, that Luffy would destroy the world. That doesn't make sense. I do think that Koby trusts Luffy as a person. So why is Oda setting up Koby standing in Luffy's way and competing with him for the One Piece? If you take anything from Vegapunk's message, it's the reveal, essentially, that the One Piece is a threat to the world. Vegapunk essentially confirmed that the ancient weapons are a part of the One Piece, meaning that a big part of this is really less about Koby specifically trying to keep the One Piece from Luffy, and it is more about Koby now having a reason to acquire it himself. He sees his faction, whether it's the Marines as they were or the Marines as they will be, as the heroes. So to save the world and prevent its destruction, naturally, Koby believes that he needs to acquire the One Piece. That is the only way to be certain. But even beyond that, I will reiterate, Koby sees himself as the hero. So he is looking for a way to save the world. And it's suggested that the answer to this question, both short-term and long-term, exists on the poneglyphs. Koby has to know exactly what happened in order to do something about it. But a part of this is certainly philosophical. Let's say that Luffy acquires the One Piece and he acquires the weapons and Koby actually believes in him. What then happens once Luffy dies, even if that death is due to old age, years in the future? Is the world going to go through this war for the One Piece every time a pirate king dies and the treasure becomes available? This all goes back to Koby believing in the idea of the Marines, and effectively the reason he did not join the Stride Pirates. The Marines are a long-term solution. If you ask me, what Koby really wants to do is he wants to create a world, or create a version of the Marines that doesn't require pirates to save the day, even if somebody like Luffy is capable and willing. I suppose the shortest way to phrase this is that Koby probably believes in law and order, which is by definition incompatible with piracy. But guys, all of this is the kind of setup that you expect from Oda to create a really compelling conflict. And this is why I'm so hyped about Koby. Like as just an example, there's other friendly characters to Luffy that Oda is teasing might eventually become his enemy or stand in his way. But I'm not sure that it measures up with Koby. You can think about Shanks. A lot of people are really hyped about a Luffy-Shanks fight in the future. Now, I'm not going to say that Shanks wants Luffy to win per se. Shanks and his crew are individually motivated, and I do think that Shanks would prefer a universe where he is the one to acquire the One Piece. That was his dream as a kid, to follow in Gold Roger's footsteps. But I do think that you can say that whether Shanks wins or whether Luffy wins, Shanks will be happy. Because for Shanks, it basically boils down to completing the adventure that Gold Roger began but could not finish. Shanks has inherited Gold Roger's will, and he believes that Luffy has done the same. So they're basically on the same team. This clearly matters more than what Shanks personally wants, which is why he gave his arm up for the future, for Luffy. But going back to Koby, we know that if Luffy wins, ultimately Luffy will create a world that Koby actually wanted. But the difference between him and Shanks is that Koby does not know this, which fundamentally creates more stakes and tension. I think that Shanks believes that he can lose to Luffy and everything will be alright. However, this is something that Koby still needs to learn, which in my opinion makes Koby more of a traditional One Piece enemy than Shanks. Because the best fights in One Piece boil down to opposing worldviews. When Luffy wins, he's not only breaking his opponent physically, he's breaking what they believe to be true. So the conflict with Koby literally began when he decided not to join Luffy. It's essentially a line in the sand. This is what I believe, different to what you believe. Koby bought into the propaganda of what a pirate is. He believed that you can't be the hero and be a pirate. But the ultimate moral is that his mentor Garp is a pirate that could exist within the Marines and treasured something other than gold. In reality, pirates are people that pursue and demand freedoms that the world establishment does not provide. So in my opinion, all of this is a really long and intricate story of Oda essentially telling Koby, you should have joined Luffy. What you really wanted the entire time was for Luffy to find the One Piece. You just didn't know that. Koby versus Luffy is the truest version of the Marines versus Pirates, philosophically. Where other Marines such as Akainu are low-key evil, Koby represents the Marines in their purest form. The good guy from the Pirates beating the good guy from the Marines matters. Many times in an actual history, those that are making the laws are the villains. So those that fight for them cannot be heroes. So we obviously don't know what's going to happen in the future, but the point of this video, and really what I wanted to convey, is I see this being far more powerful and emotional than anybody really expects. It's not that I really and truly think that a Koby versus Luffy fight is going to push Luffy to his absolute limits. It's that I see it carrying the very same emotional power as a fight such as Luffy versus Usopp. So I really hope that this fight actually happens, and we don't get a situation where Koby effectively begins to root for Luffy before they fight. Like Koby begins to believe that Luffy is the sun god Nika and the person of prophecy, or he gets defeated by somebody else. The panel that I've imagined in my head is that immediately after Luffy defeats Koby, Koby is sobbing because he can't be the hero, and he knows that now. So he asks Luffy, please help me save the world. Promise me that you will. So Luffy smiles and holds out his hand. Of course I will. But yeah guys, this is just a continuation of what I've noticed throughout the post-time skip of Luffy inheriting the dreams of those that he is defeating. You don't have the same kind of powerful emotional reaction when Big Mom was defeated or when Kaido was defeated, but you realize that Big Mom and Kaido, what they actually wanted, Luffy will fulfill. You can say the same thing about a character like Katakuri or Kizaru. Big Mom wanted a peaceful utopia where everyone is happy, joyous, there's parties, nobody is hungry. Kaido most likely wanted Joy Boy to appear. And it's a really long conversation I'm not going to justify here, but it's very likely that Katakuri wanted somebody to defeat his mother, and Kizaru wanted somebody to save Vagabond. So this is effectively the same idea, but twisted in a way that I really like. Luffy's opponent directly asks for help. Honestly, shivers just thinking about it. And it just feels like, number one, what Oda is setting up, and number two, what Oda would actually do. He is a master at taking basically the same idea and pursuing it from every angle you could imagine. I'm sure many people will have noticed, but we're essentially inverting Luffy and Nami from Arlong Park. But instead of applying it to a member of his own crew or a helpless civilian, we're applying it to his enemy or his rival. And speaking of stories brought to their natural conclusion, Luffy and Koby is Garp and Gold Roger. I also have a theory where Garp and Gold Roger were childhood friends. I'll go ahead and link it in the description. It's pretty good. But ultimately, I think that story got cut short because Roger got sick. Roger was clearly on the right side of history, not Garp. But Garp never learned that. Between Roger and Garp, there was never a definitive loser, and one did not break the other's worldview. So it's cool to think that this might happen, and it also might end up happening with Smoker as well, in a totally different way. But anyway, I really hope that you enjoyed the video, and at the very least, it gave you something to think about. If you're interested in checking out my book, The Booms, link is in the description. Remember to like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always, have a wonderful day.